Hey everyone. Just gonna make sure that everything's on, and I'm streaming this because I wanted to make sure that like everything. Oh, there we go. So, uh, I'm just gonna make kind of a quick video explanation on what's happening with Path of Exile and giving you kind of an idea of why drops have been sucking so hard um, in Lake of Calandra in 319. So, to offer you a bit of context, I'll go from the perspective of Diablo 2 and how drops work there and kind of extrapolate that into the difference in how they work in Path of Exile. And that should frame things a little better. So, essentially, how Diablo 2 does it is there's a lot of things that kind of have to intersect for you to get a good item. What happens in Diablo 2 is you can find items that give you a percentage chance, better chance to find magic items. Now, that only applies to blue items, and it would basically, if you found 100% magic find on something like a Gull Dagger, that would mean you have twice the amount of chance to find a blue item. And this gets extrapolated into the rare tiers at a lower ratio, and then at uniques at an even lower ratio. I think it's like 10% drop per. You can find a lot of like actual graphs of the curve and how it works. But that's kind of how everything is in Diablo 2. And, certain areas and bosses have a higher level, so that increases the likelihood of something rare dropping based on the bases that are available at that level at that time. And you can see like it's kind of a lot to kind of stack up, but that's why the game feels good to do boss runs, because you can go and just plain roll the dice, and it means that you might find something, it means that you might not find something, but a boss is still rewarding because they're generally a lot higher level than everything else in the area. They have a good loot table, and you know it's a little awkward, but again, the investment in doing so does yield you something better in the end, because you can go in with like 300 MF to, Mephisto wearing kind of like a three topaz helmet, for example, and a Gull Dagger, and blizzard him down with your sorceress kind of thing. So, keeping that in mind, pardon me, keeping that in mind, let's fast forward to Path of Exile. So, what Path of Exile does is they don't use the same percentage chance to find magic items. They've split this into two different things. So, what you can get in Path of Exile is either a modified item quantity or modified item rarity, or both. And generally, when you're going through a map and you find some items, they'll either modify one or the other, or both, as I just said. So, like if you find an item that has increased rarity without increasing your quantity, then you might find a little bit better items on the rarity scale, but it won't have too much of an impact unless you have a lot of it. This system also applied to the various rare mobs and magic mobs that were found in League mechanics, because in order to feel more rewarding, they had a huge buff to their quantity and rarity base drops, so that even if you didn't magic find, you still had the possibility of finding a lot better loot than just killing any random rare mob. And this kind of went way under the radar, and that's why you're seeing a lot of people complaining about how just bad everything feels. Like, all of the extra reward that would result from doing like an abyss, for example, is gone. When you engage with normal rare in a map, they don't drop much of anything. A lot of my better drops have been full stacks of currency in the forms of like whetstones and armor scrap. Like I found, 40 of each on a mob. And this also explains the fact that, harvest is still fine because chests work on a different mechanic. So all of those fixed drops are still going to work, and that's why so many people have resorted to heist, and a lot more people than I've ever seen in that area of the game, because that seems to be the only thing that's actually dropping useful things, which sucks, honestly. Now, I mean, it was just a thing in the manifesto, and this post kind of really brought to the front um, how much less everything was. So, they doubled down on it and basically said second reason removed historic bonus item quantity and or rarity applied to least specific monsters. We replaced it with a moderate 2 to 3 times increased item quantity to offset the fact that they often have more life than regular monsters, and some cannot drop maps. So, a lot to unpack here, but that increased item rarity and quantity has no effect on maps. It's like if you're dropping a rune in Diablo 2. It's just by chance that you got a map, and then, it has whatever stats on it, right? As far as I know, that is a whole like separate system from what I've been reading, but correct me if I'm wrong. So to take a system that was giving you, 100% item quantity and rarity, for example, on League monsters, and to now scale it back by 70 or 80% or more than that, actually, just kind of takes the wind out of the players' sails. Like, now you can't really roll the dice all that often on items because you would have to go through so many maps and different league mechanics to really get much of anything. And we've seen this kind of filter into what kind of rewards are being given in Harvest as well, because there's not much life force dropping relative to the cost of the crafts. So now what? Right? If you can only do like a harvest patch and get like 1 or 2 shots, and then the ultra rare crafts cost, hours or days of your time to even get one, when before you could just, RNG a good patch, see a T4 mob do it, and then just have it immediately. And then, likewise have 10 chances maybe at like a life craft. There's a lot of offset, because a lot of the joy that I had in Path of Exile was making my own items. Not gonna lie. Like, Diablo 2 is great for magic finding, and I did a lot of that in the past, but Path of Exile for me was, I get to play a character, mess around with the items, really interact with the crafting system, and, it's this form of harvest, I will stress, is better than it was before, because now I don't have to rely on a Discord to get some crafts that I need. And, alternatively, I can just farm them myself if I want. But it's, give and take. But that's why everything feels really kind of like empty. And, after this post, GGG has basically come out and said, okay, we're going to make these fixes, and we don't feel like there's necessarily a problem. There was a clip of Ben opening an Arcanist strongbox and not finding anything. They said, it's worth noting that there was this clip, and we're going to fix that specific instance. The other solution that they've offered is basically to skew the weapon and armor bases a little higher, which, doesn't do a whole lot, because power doesn't really come from the ground in Path of Exile. You have to modify those items a lot. So sure, we're getting a better armor base, but what do you do with it when you only have one shot in maybe like, you know, 10 maps if you're not really investing into harvest, into really making something good, even if it was a 6 link, right? It just feels bad. Like, I can't imagine playing SSF. Like, this would suck like so goddamn bad. And here's the 319C patch notes, and it reflects uh what's the word I'm looking for, sentiments in the announcement post, where certain things that they're modifying weren't actually the problem. Like the essence mob fix, like the life wasn't necessarily the issue. It was all of the other stacking stuff that made it hard, and then combined with the reward offset of fighting that just gives you kind of nothing. Like, I've faced 4 mod arch nemesis mobs, and that's a whole other issue, where the mob will get deleted, and maybe a 6 socket item drops, and that's it. And my filter really doesn't give a real crap about anything else, because it just didn't feel like it was really worth showing. The other argument with arch nemesis is that in a lot of the material, it looked like the arch nemesis mobs still had that item and quantity rarity applied to them, and you could get a lot of rewards off of fighting a hard mob, which doesn't seem to really be the case. So, like, reducing the life, again, that was never the problem. The armor bases was never the problem. Life force yield in lower maps helps a bit. I don't think this is quite as impactful in the outside of harvest with the higher level armor and weapon base types as they think it is, because again, stuff on the ground is usually pretty worthless, and if you don't have enough to fall back on in terms of crafting, then it's just trash. It turns into another bit of currency under your belt that's just stashed away. Now I want to clarify and kind of say that the game shouldn't be crapping loot at you without you really being able to put in that investment. And anyone who has the group to be able to do that should definitely get more. But I mean, to have loot that has been this gutted, I've never seen it. I started really playing in Betrayal League. I have like 4,500 hours in this game almost, and I've never seen such a doubling down of really that kind of sweeping change, because we're just not used to it, is the bottom line here. Like, we're used to finding some useful uniques. I barely have anything in my uniques tab. I relied on a Kirak mission to try and get a 6 link. Thankfully I got a full stack of chains that bind, but I could still be running around on a 4 link if that didn't happen, and that didn't exist. Yeah, I mean, all this to say that it just feels slower than it ever has to play Path of Exile. And I don't think there's a reason to play anything other than trade at this point, because I don't think you can make any meaningful items under the current system, and that's really going to affect Gauntlet. I don't know if people are actually going to clear it. if the current system stays that it is. Yeah, I mean, the actual league mechanic itself is kind of cool. It's just that, unrewarding again. Um, the arch nemesis stuff is kind of beside the point because it creates its own problems. And the only thing I'm going to say about that is, it was supposed to condense the amount of reading you had to do on monster fixes, which is fine. It accomplished that particular mission, but the way they stack is so likely to be against you that it's really like detrimental in, I would say, a good 70% of cases. And it just doesn't feel like they give anything back, really. Like, if I find, an abyss, again, is gonna have arch nemesis mods, and I might not be able to defeat a rare that comes up with 4 mods in a map. Same thing in Lake of Calandra. There have been, there was a Katava touched mob, and it only got like one, low tier unique from it. Like, what's that? That's not what we were shown. That's just me going through in like at least a mid tier difficulty and getting nothing. I don't know how long this is going to last because the hype is pretty bad. There are a lot of other like small things I could go through, especially since I'm playing a minion build at the moment. But I think this is really the most, really upfront change that I think they should walk back, at least in some sense. It's really hard to go from knowing how to scale that sort of item rarity and quants to, a normal mob has like maybe, and just pulling a number out of thin air at the moment. Let's say a normal mob has 5% item quantity and rarity. And to say that, a rare mob is only at 10 to 15% relatively. No, man. Just no. Anyway, that's it. Posting the video. I'm recording it on Twitch because it was easier than uploading to YouTube and signing in. But if you want to follow my YouTube channel, go to the links down there. Should lead you there, but look for Deskclock1637 on YouTube. Hit subscribe. Don't need to notify yourself of anything. My podcast is there as well in video form, and the audio form is down below. But yeah, hope things improve, and I hope we actually get some good answers on all this stuff in the near future. Yeah.